Hey there. I'm really glad you're here. Maybe it's late where you are, or maybe the world's just quiet enough right now to listen. Before we dive in, just take a second. Notice the stillness around you. Maybe there's a soft hum from a lamp, or the faint sound of wind outside your window. Wherever you are, whatever kind of day it's been, this moment, it's yours. And I'd be honored to share it with you. Tonight, we're going to talk about water. Not in a textbook way. In a way that feels like a story. One that's been flowing since before Earth had oceans. But first, just breathe. Let your shoulders drop. You don't have to hold anything here. You're safe. You're seen. You're right on time. Can I ask you something? Where in the world are you listening from right now? Are you curled up in bed on the West Coast? Maybe you're sitting on the porch in the South, letting the crickets sing. Or maybe you're somewhere in between, just letting the day melt away. If you feel like it, tell me in the comments, just a word or two. Your time zone, your town. I always love seeing where these little nighttime journeys are drifting off to. Because even though I'm just a voice in your headphones or a screen by your pillow, I like to imagine we're all sharing the same quiet water. Just different shores. I'm not here to fill your head with facts tonight. Not really. This isn't a lecture. It's more like a slow walk through something quietly incredible. If your eyelids get heavy while we wander, that's okay. If you drift off halfway through, that's kind of the point. But if you do stay awake a little longer, you just might discover that the glass of water beside your bed is holding stories older than the stars above it. This is science, yes, but told like a memory, like something your body already knows. Tonight, we're following something simple, something you touch every day without thinking. Water. Not just the kind that runs from a faucet or fills your coffee mug, but the kind that's been drifting through time, since before Earth had a name. It's not just liquid. It's memory. It's movement. It's the shape the universe takes when it wants to keep something alive. We'll trace it from the dust between stars to the oceans that rock us to sleep. All you have to do is listen. The current will carry you. If you've got a warm drink nearby, take a sip. If not, just let your breath slow down, like the surface of a lake at dusk. We're not in a rush. This isn't the kind of story you need to catch up with. It'll meet you right where you are. And from here on out, we'll drift together through the quiet birth of oceans, the whispers of ancient rain, and the strange, beautiful ways water has always stayed with us. So go ahead. Sink a little deeper into the blankets. Let your thoughts soften. And let's begin. Hydrogen, the drifter. Long before oceans, before clouds, before even the idea of Earth, there was this. Let's go back, not just years or centuries, but past the birth of the sun, past every planet, every comet, every trace of life. Back to a time when there were no clocks. Because there was nothing yet to count. The universe was young. Not young like a toddler, curious and noisy. Young like a breath that hasn't been exhaled yet. A stillness so deep it didn't know it was empty. And in that stillness, something stirred. A single, tiny particle blinked into being. No color. No sound. No way you could feel. Just hydrogen. It didn't explode or shine. It didn't make a speech. It just was. And that was enough. It began to drift. Free floating in the raw, expanding fabric of space. No destination. No map. Only motion. Hydrogen was the first. The universe's very first building block. Not flashy, not complex, just simple and steady. It became the silent scaffolding for everything to come. Billions of these little wanderers scattered outward, drawn only by gravity's gentle tug, collecting in invisible clouds, waiting for their moment. If you could have watched it, you wouldn't have seen much. No sparks, no fire, just silence thick enough to echo. But inside those clouds, hydrogen was dreaming of stars. It's funny, isn't it, that the water in your glass tonight began with something so small, so unremarkable, just floating alone in the dark, before oceans ever whispered, before rain had a sound, before a single leaf trembled with morning dew. There was hydrogen, drifting, patient, unseen, waiting to meet something that hadn't been born yet, waiting for a partner, waiting to become more. Oxygen, the fire-born. Hydrogen waited. And eventually, the stars answered. Hydrogen was quiet, but not alone forever. Out in the vast cold, gravity kept gathering it. Slowly, almost shyly, into great clouds of potential. And then, the stars ignited. Not all at once, but when enough hydrogen huddled close under pressure and heat, the first cosmic furnaces roared to life. Fusion began. That's where oxygen was born. Not in peace, but in fire. Not as a gentle presence, but as a product of violent transformation. Inside the hearts of stars, atoms slammed together, over and over, forged in temperatures that would melt even the idea of solidity. Oxygen wasn't a spectator. It was shaped in the middle of that chaos. Inside stars that lived fast, burned hot, and collapsed young. Supernovae. When those stars finally couldn't hold themselves together, they tore apart with such force that pieces of their inner selves were flung across the cosmos. Oxygen was one of those pieces. It traveled through space like an ember blown from a dying fire. Hot, radiant, and free at last. It didn't need wings. The explosion carried it far beyond its birthplace, scattering it into the raw dark. Wherever it landed, it waited. Not drifting like hydrogen. Oxygen was heavier, moodier, more deliberate. But it knew its role. It was made to combine, to bind, to build. It just needed a partner. And somewhere, in the cold silence between stars, oxygen met hydrogen. Not with a bang, but with a bond. And that's how water's story began. With fire and stillness. With the lightest thing, and one of the strongest. With a reunion billions of years in the making. One born of drift. One born of flame. And both, somehow, meant to find each other. They didn't collide. They circled. They waited. And then, they held on. Space isn't a place where things bump into each other quickly. It's not a freeway. It's a cathedral of silence, cold, empty, and patient. Hydrogen was already everywhere, whispering across the darkness in invisible clouds. Oxygen, heavier and fewer, drifted more slowly. A little cautious, a little distant. And yet, eventually, they met. Not in explosions. Not in fireworks. But in slow motion. Out among the interstellar dust. On tiny grains no larger than a speck of ash. Something began. A bond. Simple. Strong. Lasting. One oxygen, two hydrogen. A strange little triangle, bent, not perfect. But somehow, exactly right. H2O. Water. Not flowing yet. Not in drops. But as frost. These first water molecules froze themselves into the dust. Layer by layer, coating particles like delicate crystal armor. The universe made snow before it ever made seas. Little icy seeds floated through space. Not melting, not moving fast. Just drifting. They gathered. They clumped. Grains became pebbles. Pebbles grew into rocks. And some of those rocks were carrying the very first whispers of water. Locked in ice. Tucked into silence. Waiting for a world that didn't exist yet. No oceans yet. Just frozen time, hitching rides on wandering stones. Once enough of those icy dust grains had gathered, gravity stepped in again. Some were pulled into larger bodies. Clumps of rock and metal and frozen breath. Comets. Asteroids. Rough, jagged travelers, shaped by impact and motion. Not by kindness. But inside them, tucked beneath layers of ancient rock, were traces of something fragile. Frozen water. Cosmic frost sealed in like a message in a bottle. These weren't gentle messengers. They didn't glide down to earth with grace. They slammed into it. Over and over. The early earth was still molten then. More fire than soil. More chaos than home. And yet, the impacts came. Countless. Like the sky itself was trying to hydrate a newborn planet. The only way it knew how. By throwing ice at it. Each comet that hit, each icy asteroid that shattered, left behind droplets that would never leave. They didn't soak in. They stayed. Layered into the rock. Cooled into the crust. Evaporated and condensed again and again. These were the deliveries from deep space. Millions of them. Each one a glacial love letter. Spelled out in ancient ice. Not a gift placed gently into waiting hands, but a wild, messy offering hurled from the dark. Earth never sent an invitation. It didn't ask for oceans. It didn't stretch out its hands to catch the rain. It was just a hot, spinning sphere. Cracked and angry. Still pulling itself together. And yet, water came anyway. Not all at once. Not in waves or whispers. But in strikes. Violent, uninvited, and persistent. The universe didn't pour water onto Earth. It threw it. One frozen shard at a time. As if saying, "Here! You'll need this." Impact after impact. Comets shattered across a crust that could barely hold shape. Asteroids carved craters deeper than cities. And tucked inside the rubble. Drops survived. They vaporized. Cooled. Rained back down. Sank into cracks. Evaporated again. And somewhere in all that chaos, water stayed. It didn't run off. It made a home. Not because Earth was ready for it, but because the universe decided. This dry, molten place was worthy of rain. There was no countdown. No ceremony. Just a pause in the fire, and the sound of steam. Earth didn't begin as a place for water. It began as a storm of stone and heat. Spinning too fast, burning too bright. A newborn planet with a heartbeat made of fire. The crust cracked like old pottery. Lava spilled from every breath. It wasn't chaos by accident. It was the only way Earth knew how to be. But time is a quiet sculptor. And even the wildest heat must eventually rest. The skies, once too thick to see through, began to thin. Steam curled upward, rising from deep within the belly of the world. Like smoke from a forgotten fire. Like breath from something ancient waking up. No oceans yet. No rivers. Just vapor, rising in waves, gathering in the sky that was only just learning to exist. And then, the first raindrop fell. It probably didn't make a sound. There was no ground soft enough to catch it. It likely vanished on impact. Turned to steam before it even knew what it was. But it was the beginning. The atmosphere, still heavy, still trembling, kept gathering moisture. And the rain kept coming. Not for a day. Not for a season. For millions of years. A rain that didn't stop. A sky that wept with purpose. A planet, still hot and hurt, finally starting to cool. It didn't look like peace. But it was. Not a storm. A sentence. A sky learning to release. It started softly. Barely a whisper through the thick, scorched air. But the clouds were full. And they had been waiting. What came next wasn't a storm in the way we know storms. It wasn't wind howling through trees or thunder bouncing between rooftops. There were no trees. There were no rooftops. There was just earth, raw, cracked, and steaming. And a sky ready to pour. And pour it did. Not for hours. Not for days, but for millions of years. A constant, drumming fall of water, drop after drop, like fingers tapping against the skin of a sleeping world. Over and over, until the world began to stir. It hissed against volcanic stone. It carved rivers into lava that hadn't yet cooled. It filled every hollow, every wound in the crust, turning craters into lakes, turning jagged valleys into future coastlines. This was not gentle rain. It had a job to do. To smooth, to soothe, to cool a planet that had never known what it meant to hold still. The sound of it must have been endless. No pause, no silence. Just water falling through vapor, reminding the earth, "You are not fire alone." And slowly, the fire retreated. Not completely, but enough. Enough for puddles to gather. Enough for oceans to begin. Enough for the next chapter to quietly take its place. They didn't sparkle. They boiled. When the rain finally had somewhere to stay, it gathered. In lowlands, in cracks, in ancient scars left behind by a planet still healing. Water filled the silence. But these weren't the blue oceans we know. They didn't reflect the sky, because the sky hadn't turned blue yet. These seas were thick, dark, and heavy with everything the earth had coughed up. Sulfur, iron, acids, heat. They bubbled. They steamed. They pulsed with energy too wild to settle. There were no waves licking the shore. No gentle tide swaying with the moon. There wasn't even a moon yet. Instead, there were vents. Deep scars in the crust, spitting chemicals into the water like furious whispers. The oceans boiled from below, even as they cooled the surface above. It was chaos. And it was perfect. Because in that chaos, something strange began. A kind of balance. Not peace, but potential. The ocean, for all its fury, held steady. It didn't spill away. It stayed. And with every drop that stayed, Earth became less of a wound, and more of a world. And the planet begins to remember its own shape. It didn't happen quickly. Nothing sacred ever does. At first, the ocean sat heavy and still, resting in silence, cooling the wounds left behind by fire. But water isn't made to sit still forever. It moves, even when there's no one watching. The first movements weren't waves, but nudges, pushes, pressures. Drop by drop, it slid into cracks, filled tiny fractures, waited, then froze, expanded, and broke stone from the inside out. It didn't need violence. It had patience. Rain kept falling. Waves began to form. Currents found their rhythm. And the earth, this wild, scarred place, began to soften. Mountains wore down. Canyons opened. Sediment shifted. The land didn't scream. It simply changed. Every stream carved a memory. Every trickle became a trail. And slowly, water etched the name of this planet into its own skin. It wasn't destruction. It was introduction. Earth was learning to hold its shape. And water, quiet, persistent, invisible when it needed to be, was guiding its hand. Somewhere between steam and stone, the planet became a place. By now, the fire had retreated. Not vanished, just quieted. It still burned beneath the crust. But the surface had changed. What was once a storm of lava and gas had been softened by time and washed by millions of years of falling sky. And when the rain finally slowed, what remained was something new. Oceans wide and deep. Seas curling around continents not yet named. Mist hanging above waves like breath on a sleeping mouth. Water had touched everything. Not with violence, but with persistence. And the earth remembered it. You could see it in the shapes of coastlines, in the smooth curves of riverbeds, in the hush that followed a storm. This planet had been carved open, filled up, cooled down, and slowly, quietly, made ready, not for cities, not yet, not even for trees, but for the idea that something could live here and stay. It was never just about the rain. It was about what the rain allowed. A pause, a breath, a place, and water, that patient, shapeless force, had made it all possible. It wasn't silence. It was holding its breath. If you trace life's story back far enough, past every forest, every feather, every fossil, you won't find a sunrise. You'll find pressure. You'll find heat. You'll find darkness so complete, the word shadow wouldn't know where to land. Down there, far below the churning oceans, the earth split in quiet places, and through those cracks, the planet whispered upward. Boiling water surged from deep vents. Not clean, not calm, but thick with minerals, clouded with elements that could scorch skin or stir something strange to life. These weren't gardens. They were furnaces. And somehow, they were perfect. Tiny pockets formed. Not alive. Not yet. But curious. Molecules bumped into each other, held on a little longer, then let go, and tried again. And again. No eyes saw it. No voice named it. But deep beneath the waves, a rhythm began. Not from air, not from sunlight, but from the chemistry of chaos, woven quietly by. Where the sun could not follow, the earth lit its own flame. Imagine a place where light doesn't live. No color, no warmth from above, just cold silence, and water pressing in from every side, heavy as stone. Now go deeper, down past the reach of any wave, where even the boldest creatures hesitate. The ocean floor splits open, and from those cracks, the planet breathes. Superheated water bursts upward, not in violent explosions, but in columns, like pillars of steam, rising steadily from ancient wounds. They look like chimneys, but they act like candles, flickering not with fire, but with minerals, iron, sulfur, carbon, boiling in darkness. These are hydrothermal vents, cracks in the crust, where Earth exhales heat and metal into a place that has never known sunlight. Around them, there is no blue, only black, and the occasional shimmer of something strange, moving in the shadows. It's not a friendly place, but it's alive in a way the surface has never been. Here, temperature and chemistry dance. They don't need wind. They don't need sky. They just need contact. The vents hiss constantly, pouring out clouds of scalding water, up to 700 degrees Fahrenheit. Invisible in the pitch-black ocean, they stir the silence. They sculpt the space around them. And somehow, in all that pressure, in all that heat, something begins. Not a creature. Not yet. Just a question. Can something start here? The sea doesn't answer in words. It answers with time. Nothing had a name yet, but something had begun to gather. Close to the vents, where the water boiled without boiling over, tiny particles drifted, lonely, weightless, waiting without knowing what they were waiting for. They didn't have intention. They weren't alive, but they were willing. Somehow, in that heated swirl of metal and salt, molecules brushed up against each other and didn't let go. They didn't form organs. They didn't become anything we recognize. But they held. They clung. And in their clinging, they created space. Tiny bubbles, like soft shelters, formed around them. Not perfect, but enough to keep things close. Enough to slow the chaos, just long enough for something to take shape. These weren't cells. Not yet. But they were something close. A kind of stillness formed inside these pockets. A space where heat and molecules could meet again. And again. And again. Reactions happened. Some useless. Some not. But repetition is its own kind of memory. And over time, those bubbles became more than accidents. They became invitations. Not to life as we know it, but to the idea that life might be possible. The first cradle wasn't a garden. It was a blister of water and heat. And in its fragile walls, the future curled up and waited. No spark. No miracle. Just a pattern that didn't want to end. There was no light to mark the moment. No trumpet sound. No sudden shift in the current. But somewhere in the dark, reactions started to repeat themselves. Molecules folded, unfolded, folded again. Not perfectly, but with rhythm. Something in that heat, that pressure, that mineral-rich soup, made certain combinations last a little longer than others. Some twisted into shapes that resisted falling apart. Some even copied themselves, not because they meant to, but because the chemistry allowed it. It wasn't life yet, not in the way we define it, but it wasn't just matter anymore either. It was persistence. It was the beginning of memory, not held in brains, but in shapes, in structure, in the way one molecule leaned toward another and whispered, "Do that again." This was the crossroads, where physics let go, and biology took its first breath. Silent, shapeless, but undeniable. No creature claimed it. No story recorded it. But in that moment, the earth became more than stone and sea. It became a vessel for something new. Intention, however faint. And so began the long climb. From molecule to cell. From accident to purpose. The chemistry didn't end. It evolved. It directed. It carried. It watched. If we imagine water only as a backdrop, we miss the truth. It wasn't just there when life began. It shaped how life could begin. It moved heat, dissolved minerals, cushioned the fragile, and stirred the stubborn, like a conductor guiding musicians who didn't yet know they were an orchestra. Water timed the rise and fall of every reaction. It held things close long enough for bonds to form, then pulled them apart to try again. It never stopped moving, even when everything else was still. The sea was not passive. It was the rhythm, the space, the silent hand arranging pieces, without touching them directly. It wasn't just the cradle. It was the heartbeat, the chemistry, the conversation no one could hear, but everything responded to. No eyes watched. No brain understood. But water was there. Steady, curious, willing. It didn't create life. It made room for life to create itself. No one saw it happen. But the sea might never have forgotten. We walk past puddles. We pour glasses. We watch rain slide down windows, without ever asking where it's been. But what if, somewhere in the heart of every drop, there's a memory? Not a story. Not a picture. But a trace. Of the vent where it curled around the first spark. Of the bubble that sheltered the first fragile bonds. Of the heat, the darkness, the silence where biology began breathing its first questions. Water has no voice, but it carries everything. Minerals, heat, history. It flowed before life existed. It shaped the moment life began, and it's never stopped moving since. So the next time you touch it, when it brushes your skin, fills your lungs with mist, or runs through your fingers like it's always known the way, remember, you might be holding the same molecule that once held the beginning of everything. Before there were hearts, there was water, and it was already beating, long before animals walked, before leaves turned sunlight into breath, Earth had a rhythm. It didn't come from music. It wasn't made of sound. It came from movement. Steady, shifting, endless. The ocean swayed with the pull of a moon just finding its place. Currents circled like blood without a body. Tides inhaled and exhaled, sculpting shorelines, like time brushing its fingers through sand. And deep below, the water beneath the surface was learning to carry temperature, energy, and memory. Every wave, every ripple, was part of a heartbeat, older than lungs. Not random, not chaotic, but not planned either. Just consistent, enough to matter, enough to change what came next. Because when light finally reached the shallows, when the first tiny forms of life began to stretch toward warmth, the planet already had a rhythm to offer. A pulse, a path, a place where things could grow, and float, and drift with meaning. Water didn't just carry life forward. It kept time. And Earth, this spinning, stubborn world, learned to listen. The first oxygen didn't come from trees. It came from water's smallest voices. Before forests, before flowers, before even the shadow of a leaf, something was breathing. Tiny creatures, no larger than dust, floated near the surface of ancient seas. They had no eyes, no mouths, no thought, but they knew how to catch sunlight, how to drink in energy, and let go of something strange and invisible. Oxygen. They didn't do it on purpose. It wasn't a gift. It was just what happened when they lived. These small, single cells, cyanobacteria, we call them now, were the first to reshape the sky. Not with force, with numbers. There were billions of them, dancing in the light, breathing quietly, over centuries, over eons. And slowly, the air began to change. What once was thick with gas and fire started to hold something new, something that future lungs would one day crave. We like to think forests made the earth breathable, but the truth is, life in the sea wrote that chapter first, with no face, no voice, just a rhythm. Inhale light, exhale future. It didn't rush. It flowed with purpose, like thought without language. Even after the sky began to change, the ocean still held their secrets. But they were learning, not with minds, with motion. The sun warmed the surface, but not every surface equally. Some waters stayed warm, some stayed cold, and the sea began to stir. Currents formed, not wild, but precise. Cold water sank, warm water rose, salt whispered directions. Winds helped carry the rhythm. And suddenly, the sea had arms, vast, invisible arms, that wrapped around the world. These weren't waves. They were deeper, slower, more patient. They carried heat across hemispheres, nutrients across centuries, life across silence. Without ever being seen, the ocean became the architect of every climate, every storm, every shore. A single stream in the Atlantic could take 1,000 years to complete its path, and yet, it never forgets where to go. Earth didn't plan this. It simply followed water's lead. And life, wherever it floated, crawled, or rooted, learned to follow it too. No sheet music, no audience, just movement that meant something. From the deepest trench to the surface glinting in sunlight, water moved in rhythms too slow for the eye, but too steady to be chance. No one told the tides when to rise. No one taught the currents where to turn. And yet, everything moved with purpose. It was as if the oceans were playing a song, one made of heat and salt, depth and distance, gravity and time. Tiny plankton rode the pulses, feeding fish that fed whales that fed worlds. Nutrients sank, cycled, returned. Storms gathered over warm seas, not as chaos, but as responses, replies to imbalance, spoken in rain and wind. Every drop knew what to do, not because it was told, because it listened. Water didn't organize life. It allowed it. It hosted it. It made space for trial and error, growth and collapse, a beginning and a way back. And life, quietly, gratefully, joined the rhythm, like a note falling perfectly into place, in a song no one had written. But everyone followed. Not with lungs, with balance. There was no manual, no rulebook carved in stone. Only the sea, always moving, always watching, responding without words. When the planet grew too hot, water pulled warmth from the surface and tucked it deep into the currents. When the air grew heavy, oceans absorbed the weight, quietly holding more than they should have had to. They didn't rebel. They adjusted. And in doing so, they taught the planet to self-correct, to cool down without freezing, to warm without burning through. The sea became Earth's lungs, before lungs even existed, breathing in carbon, breathing out life. No instructions, no applause, just the same rhythm, again and again, guiding mountains, weather, and time itself. We like to think we invented adaptation, but water knew it long before us. It didn't change the world by force. It changed it by staying. And in staying, it gave Earth its first real gift: resilience. No fire, no storm, just a hush made of ice. It didn't happen in an instant. The cold crept in like a secret, quiet, slow, uninvited. One season lingered too long, then another, and another, until the snow didn't melt, until the sea turned to glass. It wasn't winter. It was something deeper. The whole earth, oceans, forests, sky, began to hold its breath. Ice grew bold. It spread down from the poles, crawling across land, locking rivers, stilling tides. It didn't roar like a volcano, or crash like a storm. It simply covered. Softly, completely. The planet dimmed. Sunlight struck the ice, and bounced back into space. No warmth, no absorption, just reflection, cold and endless. From above, Earth looked like a marble of glass. Still, beautiful, unforgiving. It wasn't death. It was pause. A long, frozen inhale. And somewhere beneath the layers, beneath the frozen crust of ocean, water still waited, moving in tiny circles, carrying life like a secret tucked beneath a blanket of silence. The world didn't vanish. It reflected, as the ice stretched across oceans, climbed mountains, and settled over every living thing. The light changed. It no longer soaked into soil. It didn't warm skin, or wake sleeping seeds. Instead, it bounced off glaciers, off snowfields, off frozen seas turned flat and glassy. The earth became a mirror, not one that showed faces, but one that erased them. Sunlight hit the surface, and left just as quickly, glancing off without a trace, like a visitor knocking, but never entering. The planet cooled further, not from lack of light, but from the way it was refused. No warmth stayed long enough to sink in. No heat stayed long enough to soften anything. It was breathtaking, in the way that beauty sometimes is, when it forgets to make room for life. And so the world remained, silent, bright, a reflection with nothing behind it but waiting, not with rage, with warmth that wouldn't give up. Even as ice gripped the world in silence, the heart of the planet kept beating. Beneath mountains of frozen time, deep inside the Earth's crust, the fire never died. It only waited. And slowly, so slowly, it rose again. Volcanoes didn't explode. They murmured. They cracked through seams of ancient frost, sending steam into skies that hadn't felt breath in ages. Lava met ice. A quiet confrontation. Not war, but reminder that beneath all stillness, movement was waiting. That beneath all cold, there was memory of heat. Glaciers began to weep. Not dramatically, just enough. Enough for meltwater to trickle down stone, carve new paths, and awaken buried rivers. The world didn't thaw all at once. It unfolded. One drip, one stream, one floodplain at a time. As if the earth was stretching after a long, frozen dream. No chisels. No plans. Just patience that moved mountains. As the ice loosened its grip, the water didn't rush in. It seeped. It slid. It remembered where it had once flowed, and found new places to go. Glaciers melted, and the runoff threaded through valleys like silver ink. Old paths were washed clean. New ones were drawn. Mountains were shaped. Valleys carved. Plains formed not by force, but by return. Rivers that had never existed before, now twisted like signatures across the land. Lakes pooled in footprints the ice had left behind. And coastlines, so long frozen into shape, softened under the touch of moving water. It wasn't loud. It wasn't fast. But it was permanent. The water didn't ask for permission. It didn't ask to be seen. It simply arrived and began to edit. Not to destroy. To refine. Earth's face was changed not by what shattered it, but by what loved it long enough to reshape it gently. And in waiting, it transforms. We talk about power like it's loud, like it explodes, commands, conquers. But water doesn't rush to prove anything. It lingers. It softens. It returns to the same place, again and again, until even stone begins to yield. During the great freezes, water didn't vanish. It paused, held in ice, tucked beneath snowdrifts, stored in silence. And when it came back, it didn't roar. It flowed, down old paths, through new valleys, into cracks it had once been pushed from. It smoothed the jagged, lifted what had sunk, fed what had gone brittle. It didn't take credit. It didn't need thanks. It simply kept moving, as it always had, reminding the world that resilience doesn't arrive with thunder. It seeps in slowly, and stays. Before we built walls, we built fires near streams. Long before borders, before roads or kings or names written in stone, we followed the sound of water, not because it was sacred, because it was necessary. Where it flowed, we stopped. Where it pooled, we drank. Where it flooded, we learned when to wait. Where it dried, we learned when to move. The first maps weren't drawn. They were walked, etched by feet on soft riverbanks, memorized in stories told by firelight, of the place where the water bends, where the fish rise, where the stones stay warm even after sundown. We didn't know yet what water was made of. We only knew how it made us feel. Safe, fed, anchored. And so, long before we called anything home, we let the rivers decide where life could begin. We didn't shape the land shaped us. One stream at a time. Not in ink. In flood, in harvest, in memory. Long before books, before alphabets or calendars, there were rivers, and they remembered for us. The Nile didn't just nourish the land. It marked the seasons. When it rose, the people planted. When it fell, they gathered. When it flooded, they waited, and trusted that it would return to balance. Along the Ganges, along the Tigris, along the Yangtze, water told us when to move, when to stay, when to pray. Civilizations didn't rise near rivers by chance. They rose because water made it possible. Because floods brought silt. Because silt brought crops. Because crops brought people. And people brought stories. We think of rivers as borders now. But once, they were beginnings. They were teachers. Healers. Gods. Their currents taught us rhythm. Their floods taught us fear. And their return each year, despite everything, taught us hope. Because sometimes it answered. To the ones who lived close to it. Who drank from it. Bathed in it. Feared it. Water was never just water. It was a spirit. A blessing. A temperamental guest. That could give everything. Or take it all away. They spoke to it. Sang to it. Offered it tokens. Fish bones, grains, the first cut of fruit. Not to control it, but to show they understood. Because when the rains didn't come, they begged the rivers to forgive them. And when the floods rose too fast, they whispered to the sea, "Enough! Please!" Water was worshipped because it was intimate. It ran through their days. It ended their nights. It waited in wells. It rushed through ravines. It knew every secret before anyone else did. And so, they called it by names. Meant for gods. Rainmakers. River mothers. Ocean fathers. Not out of superstition, but out of gratitude, fear, and the unshakable feeling that someone, or something, was listening. We stopped praying to water. We started planning it. As our numbers grew, as fires became hearths, and paths became roads, we needed more than water's mercy. We needed its obedience. So we dug wells first. Deep, careful holes in dry places, where silence gave way to the sound of dripping life. Then came channels, ditches, stone-cut canals that bent rivers. Just enough to feed fields no flood would reach on its own. Water stopped being a mystery. It became a problem to solve, a system to manage, a number on a map. We measured it, divided it, built schedules around it. Where it once arrived on its own terms, we now built gates to decide when it could come. And with every trench, every aqueduct, we grew more certain that water could be tamed. We didn't stop needing it. But somewhere along the way, we stopped bowing to it. Even when we thought we were in charge, we thought we'd mastered it. With wells, dams, aqueducts, with cities that pulsed to the sound of flowing pipes, we believed we had finally bent water to our will. And then it reminded us. A flood that swallowed whole towns, without a second thought. A drought that cracked the land, where rivers once ran wide. A well gone dry. Even as the skies stayed empty for months, we'd learned to plan, to ration, to store. But water never forgot what we had forgotten. That control is always temporary. That nature listens politely, but answers on its own time. Still, it never left us. It flooded, but also healed. It vanished, but returned. It wrecked, then restored. And in each lesson, hard or gentle, it reminded us what we once knew. When we built fires near rivers, and listened to the sound of streams before we slept, that to live with water is to be in relationship with it, not above it. And it listened, just long enough for us to think we'd won. It started small. A well dug deeper than before. A trench carved by hand. A hollow reed used to carry a stream a little farther from its bed. We weren't trying to dominate nature. We were trying to survive it. To bring water closer to our fires, so we didn't have to walk so far with heavy hands. So the children wouldn't thirst at night. But soon, small became structured. Ditches turned into channels. Channels into systems. And systems into empires. We learned to slope the land, to angle stone just right, to let gravity carry the burden. Water became a thing we could move, not chase. For the first time, we weren't waiting for the rain. We were guiding the flow, taming the meander, telling the river, "No here." It worked, until it didn't. Because even when it listens, water remembers the path it carved on its own. And sometimes, in the middle of a quiet night, it returns to it, not just a need, but a vision made real in stone. We didn't just move water. We began to honor how it moved. In Persia, they dug canons, tunnels deep beneath the earth, angled just enough, so water could glide for miles without spilling a drop. In India, they carved stepwells, giant staircases descending into shadow, where each level waited for the rain to return. A temple, a reservoir, a quiet act of hope. And in Rome, arches rose from the hills, carrying aqueducts that whispered above rooftops, delivering water not just to drink, but to bathe, to cleanse, to celebrate. Water no longer flowed by accident. It was directed by design, held in pools that mirrored the sky, trickled through courtyards, fountains, gardens that bloomed in defiance of heat. It wasn't just engineering. It was expression, proof that we had learned not just how to survive, but how to shape comfort out of chaos. Where water once meant life, it now meant beauty too, and in doing so, crowned itself. For the Romans, water wasn't just for survival. It was spectacle, status, proof that they had not only conquered land, but nature itself. They pulled it from distant springs, carried it across mountains, threaded it above cities on stone spines that seemed to float in the air. To walk through Rome was to hear water everywhere, pouring from lion heads, spilling into marble basins, cooling courtyards where senators sat in silk. Baths weren't just places to clean. They were places to be seen, to talk, to scheme, to dream beneath the echoes of vaulted ceilings, where warm mist softened every word. Aqueducts were more than pipes. They were promises that no citizen would thirst, that Rome could command rivers, that civilization itself could be built on something as slippery as a stream. And for a while, it worked. The empire flowed on limestone and water, until it didn't, because even in marble, fountains crack, and water, so quiet, so patient, knows how to wait for the return of silence. You don't see it, but you live by it. Turn on a faucet, a quiet stream appears, clear, clean, instant. We barely notice. But behind that sound, beneath streets, under floors, inside walls, a vast and silent orchestra plays. Pipes stretch for miles, underground veins pulsing with pressure. Filters hum in distant buildings, valves twitch open and closed, adjusting flow, temperature, timing. It's a system so complex, no single mind can hold it all. Yet it works. Almost always. We treat water like it's simple. Just there. Just ours. But each drop that slides across your palm has traveled farther than you've been. Through mountains, through metal, through hands you'll never meet. Every modern city is a symphony of water, quietly tuned by unseen hands. And when one note slips, a broken main, a poison line, a storm too big to hold, the silence becomes deafening. Because even now, even here, we don't control water. We only direct it, while it still agrees to listen. Their names aren't etched in stone, but their work still runs beneath your feet. We turn the handle. Water comes out. Clean, clear, instant, and we move on. But behind that effortless moment are generations of hands that built the impossible, without asking to be seen. Engineers who traced the slope of a city by candlelight. Workers who carried iron pipe through heat and rain. Designers who dreamed of flowcharts before flow existed. They imagined a world where no one had to beg the sky for rain, where a child in a tenement could have the same drink as one in a palace. They worked in silence, under floors, inside walls, down tunnels thick with mud and steam, so we could forget what water used to cost. No parades mark their victories. No statues hold their names. But they are the reason. Your morning coffee brews. Your shower warms. Your fire hydrants hiss when it matters most. They are the quiet architects of the most important comfort we never think about. And when we raise a glass, even without knowing, we are always toasting them. This isn't its first sky, or its last. The rain tapping at your window tonight. It's not new. It may have once fallen on a dinosaur's back, hung in the clouds above ancient oceans, slid through jungle roots long before humans had names. This isn't poetry. It's cycle. It's truth. Water doesn't vanish. It moves. It shifts shape, trades names, changes pace. But it always returns. Evaporation is just water rising to think. Condensation is it remembering how to fall. Rain is the return. Not to where it began, but to where it's needed. Even the steam rising from your tea might someday become a glacier. The tear on your cheek might someday drift as snow over a quiet forest. There is no final destination, just an endless loop of lift, drift, and return. And in every droplet, a memory, not of words or faces, but of movement, of patience, of becoming again. Even the air knows when to release what it holds. High above the ground, where silence moves slower, and wind has room to wander, water waits in the air, not as drops, but as possibility. It gathers without hurry. Each particle clings to dust, to cold, to gravity's whisper. Clouds aren't just decoration. They are conversations in progress, between earth and sky, heat and chill, holding and release. And when the moment is right, not too early, not too much, the sky lets go. What falls isn't just rain. It's a decision, a return. The warmth that carried it up is traded for the cool that calls it back down. One drop becomes two. Two become thousands. And suddenly, a forest listens. A field breathes. A river stirs in its bed. Condensation isn't surrender. It's generosity. The sky could have held on longer. But it didn't. But it always finds a place to belong. It begins as a hush. A shift in light. That soft stillness before the sky speaks. Then, a tap. A drop. A rhythm born in midair. Rain doesn't choose a destination. It doesn't aim. It simply lets go, trusting the wind to carry it, the earth to catch it. It might land on a rooftop in the city, or vanish into the fur of a bear. It might fall on asphalt and run to a storm drain, or kiss a leaf and rest for a moment before sliding free. It doesn't ask where it's going. It just goes. And in that falling, everything stirs. Seeds awaken. Soil exhales. Skin lifts to meet the sky. Each raindrop is a traveler, without a ticket. Just gravity, memory, and the gentle faith that somewhere, something is waiting to be watered. Rain is the only visitor we welcome without knowing who sent it. Not lost, just quiet. Not all water rushes to the sea. Some of it chooses the long way down. It slips between roots, sinks past stone, wins through soil, grain by grain, disappearing from sight, but never from the story. Down there, beneath cities and forests and feet that never pause, water slows. It thickens. It listens. Sometimes it pools in deep aquifers, where light has never reached. Sometimes it travels sideways for years, or rests for centuries, held like a breath in the chest of the earth. It doesn't vanish. It prepares. And one day, maybe in spring, maybe not for 1,000 seasons, it will find its way back up. A spring will open. A well will refill. A crack in the rock will glisten with its return. The journey isn't linear. It's circular, but not perfect. More like a spiral. Always moving. Always remembering. It's a rhythm. A pulse. A way of remembering. We call it a cycle, but it doesn't spin like a perfect wheel. It sways. It stretches. It lingers where it wants. Returns when it's ready. Sometimes a drop becomes rain again in a day. Sometimes it takes 1,000 years. Locked in ice. Hidden in stone. Curled in the belly of a seed. It's not a schedule. It's a conversation. Between sky and soil. Cloud and clay. Heat and hush. Evaporation. Condensation. Precipitation. Percolation. Big words for something soft. Something simple. Something older than language. The water cycle isn't a lesson from school. It's the reason rivers still run. It's why you can drink from your cup. And know that somewhere, that drop has already danced. Through forests, clouds, and the lungs of another living thing. It never truly ends. It just keeps becoming. It's our attention that's drying up. The world still has water. Enough to circle the sky. To feed the trees. To carry the clouds across the ocean. But the kind we can drink, hold in our hands, pour into thirsty soil. That kind is rare. Just a sliver. A whisper in the vastness. Less than 1% of all the water on Earth is fresh, liquid, accessible, and we treat it like it's infinite. Like it's always been there. And always will be. We waste it brushing teeth we barely think about. We lose it through leaking pipes we never see. We forget it when it's quiet, and panic only when it stops showing up. It's not the water that's vanishing. It's our reverence, our memory, our pause. Because the truth is, if we listened, if we remembered what it took for one drop to reach our glass, we might not use it like it's nothing. We might hold it like a story that's been traveling for billions of years, just to get here, just to be trusted, in your hands. But we only seem to listen when it screams. It speaks in silence first. A dry creek bed where there used to be frogs. A well that takes longer to fill. A field that cracks before harvest. Then louder. A flood that swallows whole neighborhoods. A storm that dumps a year's worth of rain in a single night. A river that creeps into homes uninvited. Sometimes it's poisoned, not by itself, but by the things we let slip into it. Runoff, waste, chemicals with names too long to pronounce. Other times it's taken, dammed, diverted, drained, until the land it once touched forgets how to grow. Then come the arguments, the borders, the fights over who owns what, who gets to drink, who must wait. Water doesn't raise its voice, but it leaves marks. And lately, those marks have become harder to miss. This isn't just weather. It's a message. And every drought, every flood, every contaminated drop asks the same quiet question. Are you listening yet? But they don't arrive with fanfare. They arrive with patience. Somewhere, someone is cleaning gray water with plants, turning wastewater into greenhouses, sunlight into filters. Elsewhere, a small machine hums beside the sea, removing salt from ocean water drop by drop. Not to make headlines, just to keep a village alive. There are rooftops that collect rain, like a gift, Fields that recycle every ounce they use. Faucets designed to whisper instead of shout. None of these things are magic. They're humble, tested, quiet. They don't promise forever. But they offer something better. A way to begin again, without waiting for disaster. The future of water isn't locked in a lab. It's already flowing through the hands of farmers, engineers, artists, children learning where their water comes from. These aren't inventions. They're invitations. And if we choose to look, we'll see them. Not as miracles, but as reminders. That small, steady change is still possible. It's not just about pipes and pumps. It's about what we choose to believe. Technology can clean water. It can stretch supplies. It can recycle what was once wasted. But none of it matters if we don't change the story we tell ourselves. We need to see water not as a resource to use, but as a gift to honor. A living thread connecting us all. From desert to rainforest. From mountain spring to city tap. Respect isn't built by regulations alone. It grows in classrooms, in kitchens, in conversations between neighbors. When we understand how fragile the balance is, how every drop has traveled through time, we begin to treat it differently. Not out of fear, but out of care. Not because it's scarce, but because it's sacred. This is the shift that matters. The one that rewrites our future. Not by machines, but by minds and hearts, willing to listen. Every drop asks us, what will you do next? When you lift that glass of water, clear, cool, life-giving, you're holding more than liquid. You're holding a story. A journey that began billions of years ago, that crossed stars and oceans, and found its way to your hand. But it's also a question. A quiet challenge wrapped in clarity. Will we protect this ancient traveler? Will we honor the paths it's taken? Will we remember that water is not ours to waste, but ours to guard? The future isn't written in stone. It flows like water, always moving, always changing. And in your hands, right now, is the power to shape what comes next. So when you drink, pause a moment. Feel the weight of that question, because the story of water, and of us, is still unfolding.